This is body cam footage of La Catrina's final moments. From Instagram star to cartel assassin, her last post showed her posing with a golden gun. But here she's seen bleeding out while a soldier's trying to comfort her. Here at times, IG models messed with the wrong gangs. October 20th, 2021. A woman in this red swimsuit walks towards a hammock by a luxurious pool in Tulum, Mexico. She posts one final Instagram reel with the caption, "Vibing with the ocean." But in just a few hours, this San Jose-based influencer would find herself caught in the middle of a war she didn't even know was happening. Imagine living your dream, traveling the world, and sharing your adventures with your 40,000 loyal followers. That's exactly what Anjali Rayat was doing. With close to 700 pictures on her Instagram, she was living the influencer's dream, one perfect shot at a time. But we know tourism in Mexico can have a dark side. These towns aren't always the paradise getaways they seem. They oftentimes become battlegrounds as well. And in places like Tulum, the line between vacation hotspot and cartel territory gets blurry. Cartels like the Gulf Cartel and Los Zetas have been running these areas for years. These guys had more power than the actual government. Further down in Tamaulipas, 3 main cities were already completely under their control, and people showed more respect to cartel members than they did to the police. Well, they had to if they wanted to stay alive. Anjali had arrived in Tulum that Monday to celebrate her upcoming 30th birthday with her husband, Utkar Srivastava. Her first post would show her standing by a pool at the hotel she was staying at, wearing a white top with her floral shorts, a hat, and shades. The caption read, "Hola from Tulum," thinking that this would be yet another amazing trip to add to her travel blog. The fun kept rolling until the next day. October 19th, she posted another photo of herself, this time enjoying the night at a local bar. But little did she know that in less than 24 hours, this caption would become a tragic reminder that in cartel territory, there's always something to worry about. While terrorists were snapping photos for their Instagram, the cartels were fighting an invisible war. The CJNG and Los Pelones were battling it out. Los Pelones wasn't just any gang. They were a powerful branch of the Gulf Cartel, and they'd made business out of extorting money from every bar and restaurant in the Cancun area. But sometime during 2020, they decided that Cancun wasn't enough and that places like Tulum and Playa del Carmen needed to start paying up too. October 20th, 2021. Anjali and her husband went to dinner at La Maquerida, a popular hotspot in Tulum's Mini Quinta area, thanks to its reputation for being the place where tourists could mingle after dinner. And after their meal, Anjali and her husband did exactly that, hanging out on the terrace with other travelers, completely unaware that they'd picked the wrong night to stay out late. At 10:30 p.m., a man comes running into the restaurant looking for somewhere to hide. 4 others follow him in, carrying weapons, and before anyone could even process what was happening, they opened fire.
A San Jose woman is one of 2 tourists killed in the crossfire of a suspected drug gang shootout in Mexico.
Anjali died instantly. Jennifer Hensoldt, a German tourist, was rushed to the hospital but didn't make it as well. And 2 other German men and a Dutch woman would take bullets, but they survived. 2 days later, Los Pelones made sure that everyone knew exactly why this happened. They left messages at Tulum's local market reading,
"The shooting was a warning so you can see we mean business. You either get in line, or we are going to continue shutting down places like the Mini Quinta."
In other words, this tragedy happened because the restaurant owners weren't paying their protection money fast enough. But this was far from an isolated incident. Over the past 20 years, more than 2 million people have died, while cartels made their billions. And by 2023, over 550 Americans went missing in Mexico. Some were kidnapped and others were simply caught in the crossfire, just like Anjali. What they all had in common, though, was that they never made it home. October 27th, 2021, Anjali's body made its final journey, first to Chandigarh and then to Ceylon. Her family held a small prayer at the St. Stephen's Church before her cremation. Her dad later told reporters that they had just saw her months before, after completing her diploma, and that they had no idea it would be the last time they'd see their daughter. Today, her Instagram account is still up, and those 700 travel photos tell the story of a woman who lived for adventure. The last poolside reel, the drinks at Funky Geisha, the worry less caption, they all seem like snapshots of paradise. Right up until the moment that paradise showed its teeth. But while some IG models get caught up in cartel wars by accident, others might dive headfirst into that dangerous world, expecting a different ending than the one they get. It's 2023, Bogota, Colombia. A young woman with freshly dyed hair rents a small room on the outskirts of town, trying to blend in with the crowd. Just months earlier, she'd been living the high life as a cartel leader's girlfriend. But now, she's running for her life. At just 27 years old, she managed to become one of South America's most wanted criminals. But Wanda del Valle Bermudez didn't start out that way. Born in Peru, she was just another girl trying to survive in a country where cartels had more power than the actual government. It was a place where corruption was everywhere. From business deals to immigration, if money was involved, then somebody was probably getting paid under the table. Everything changed for Wanda when she met Christopher Fuentes, but everyone called him Maldito Chris or Cursed Chris, and here's a very good reason why. Chris was a big shot in the Tren de Aragua, one of Venezuela's most feared criminal organizations. They weren't a typical street gang. They had plenty of politicians and officers in their pockets. And this is where most people would run the other way. But Wanda fell head over heels. In fact, sitting in her cell today, she still talks about him like a lovesick teenager.
Lo amo y lo extraño. Porque todos tenemos un corazón.
And at first, things were great. It was all designer bags, fancy vacations, and just living the high life. Wanda claims that she was just an informal merchant, selling things like outfits, purses, and perfumes on the side. And according to her, she never even questioned where all the extra money came from.
Tu esposo te da un regalo, tú vas a preguntarle a tu esposo de dónde tú sacaste la plata para el regalo. Es un regalo, es un obsequio.
But there's always a catch when you're dating a cartel boss. Soon enough, Wanda found herself handling the business side of things, and she would start managing secret bank accounts, arranging deals, and passing messages between cartel members. Before she knew it, she was in deep. So deep that the other gang members started calling her La Bebecita del Crimen, meaning the crime baby, because of how young she was. Although Wanda swears she never got her hands dirty.
Yo nunca recibí ningún dinero de ningún tipo de extorsión, de ningún trata de blanca, nada, de absolutamente nada.
But she wasn't shy about throwing Christopher under the bus.
Hay videos de Christopher disparando, hay videos de Christopher atracando, hay videos de Christopher en muchas cosas. Porque yo tampoco me voy a poner, lo voy a poner como el bueno, no.
However, the authorities paint a very different picture. They say this innocent girlfriend was actually coordinating drug shipments, managing extortion rackets, and laundering millions in drug money. She had gone from counting other people's dirty money to making her own. And then in 2023, everything went sideways. During a police chase, Maldito Chris got into a shootout with Colonel Victor Revoredo. When the smoke cleared, Chris was dead, and Wanda's world fell apart. Now, instead of running out of this cartel life, she dove even deeper. She put a bounty on Colonel Revoredo's head, enough money to attract some serious sicarios. But the hitman got caught before he could do the job, and suddenly Wanda found herself with a target on her back. So then she went on the run and dyed her hair, though she still claims that was just because Christopher liked it that way, and then she tried to disappear into Colombia. But when you have the feds working with police from different countries tracking you down, there aren't many places to hide. The hunt for Wanda turned into this international operation. Tips started coming in from everywhere, people spotting her in different cities, whispering about where she might be hiding. In December 2023, Usme, Colombia, federal agents would surround a small apartment building in this poor neighborhood of southern Bogota. And inside, the woman they've been hunting for months is about to get a wake-up call she never expected. In her arrest photos, Wanda wasn't rocking designer clothes anymore. In fact, the opposite. It's like she didn't want to get noticed. But even after everything, even with a kid back in Peru waiting for her, Wanda still defends her choices.
Un niño que me ama y que me hace llorar porque me dice, mamá, tú eres todo menos lo malo.
Today she's sitting in a Colombian prison, waiting to face justice in Peru. She spends her time giving interviews, trying to convince everyone that she was just a girlfriend who got in too deep.
Yo estoy aquí con mi frente en alto. Sí tengo miedo de ser extraditada, tengo miedo de que mi vida corra peligro. Yo le pido perdón de mi parte a las personas que él le causó daño.
But between the bounty on the colonel's head and the millions in laundered money and all the evidence the police had against her, it's pretty hard to buy La Bebecita del Crimen's innocent act. Now, if Wanda learned her lesson about messing with the cartels the hard way, our next story shows what happens when you don't learn it at all. January 10th, 2020, La Bocanada, Mexico. A helicopter's racing through the sky, carrying a dying woman. She's 21 years old, barely an adult, and she's bleeding out from a neck wound. Just hours earlier, she'd been one of Mexico's most feared cartel leaders, but now she's fighting for her last breaths. Now, to understand how Maria Guadalupe Lopez Esquivel went from a farmer's daughter to dying in a government chopper, we need to go back to where it all started. 2017, Tepalcatepec, Mexico. The daughter of a farmer and a housewife sits in front of her TV, mesmerized by shows about powerful drug lords. Her favorite is La Reina del Sur, the Queen of the South. And while many would watch these shows and see the warning signs, young Maria saw a blueprint for power. So at just 18 years old, she makes a decision that would change everything. She runs away from home to join the Jalisco New Generation cartel. El Mencho has transformed these people from humble avocado farmers into Mexico's most feared cartel.
For the first time, cartel kingpin El Mencho tonight is a $15 million man. That is the U.S. government reward just increased and placed on the head of Ruben Aseguera Cervantes, alias El Mencho.
He's a very powerful trafficker in Mexico, and he has cells all over the world. He's a person that we would consider as public enemy number one.
Now, for Maria, walking into cartel life meant there was no turning back. But she didn't seem to mind it one bit. Instead, she created a new identity, that of La Catrina, after Mexico's skeleton lady of death. Soon, her IG feed became a window into cartel life. She'd be posing with guns and showing off expensive jewelry, and between each post, she was busy turning herself into something far more dangerous than just another cartel member. Now, usually you start off at the bottom, but La Catrina was different. Her rise through the ranks was meteoric, and within a year, she had her own group of sicarios, and she wanted to put them to good use too. October 14th, 2019, Aguililla, Mexico. La Catrina shows exactly what makes the CJ&G so feared. She plans and executes one of the bloodiest law enforcement ambushes in recent Mexican history that left 14 officers dead and 9 others wounded. La Catrina embraced violence, personally overseeing torture sessions and planning attacks. Her Instagram stories would switch from makeup tutorials to weapons training. One day she'd be showing off her latest purchase, and the next she'd be coordinating drug shipments. But karma's like a boomerang, and eventually you get what you give. January 10th, 2020. Federal agents had received a tip about a CJ&G safe house in La Bocanada. Inside, we had La Catrina holding court. When the first shots rang out, she grabbed her weapon and started firing back. But all the bulletproof vests in the world couldn't save her from what happened next. A single bullet found its mark on her neck. The girl who had orchestrated the deaths of dozens was now lying in the rubble, blood soaking through her clothes. A soldier wearing a body cam knelt beside her, trying to offer comfort to someone who had shown none to others.
When
the helicopter took off, its mission wasn't to take Maria into custody, but to save her. Yet La Catrina never made it to the hospital. She succumbed to her injuries mid-flight. And just like that, this Instagram queenpin, who once commanded sicarios, was gone, dead at 21 years old, with one last bullet proving that no amount of followers can make you bulletproof. Today, La Catrina's Instagram has been deleted, but her photos are still floating around out there, designer clothing and gold-plated guns. There's one final video that doesn't match her carefully curated photo ops. Footage of her last moments, bleeding out in the dirt while a soldier, out of all people, tries to comfort her. Two different sides of the same story, except one is filtered through Instagram, and the other through the unforgiving lens of reality. Now, while La Catrina's last moments were caught on camera, our next cartel queen was only discovered in pieces. April 13th, 2015, Matamoros, Mexico. 3 beer coolers sitting in the back of an abandoned pickup truck near the Texas border. Inside, Mexican authorities are about to make a discovery that'll leave them shaken to their core. But it's not just what they found, it's that they can only identify one of the victims by a single tattoo on what remains of her arm, a tattoo that simply reads Niño. But to understand how a teenage girl ended up dismembered in a beer cooler, we gotta go back to where it all began. Tamaulipas, Mexico, early 90s. While other little girls were playing with their dolls, Jocelyn Alejandro Niño was learning a harsh lesson about life in cartel territory. You either become prey or predator, and Jocelyn chose to become the scariest predator she could be. The Gulf Cartel had been running the streets since before Jocelyn was born. These guys were frickin' powerful. They were the ones who trained the infamous Los Zetas, possibly some of the most brutal killers Mexico had ever seen. And by the time Jocelyn hit her teenage years, they were looking for fresh recruits. Now, most girls jumping into the cartel get assigned simple roles, stuff like lookouts, money counting, and maybe honey traps for rival gang members. But Jocelyn, now known as La Flaca, had different plans. She didn't just learn how to shoot, she excelled at it. While her former classmates were getting ready for that high school graduation, La Flaca was too busy planning tactical operations and leading her own group of killers in Los Ciclones, the Gulf Cartel's most feared faction. But in 2015, La Flaca made a fatal mistake. A photo leaked online, just one picture, but it would seal her fate. There she was, a young woman with an innocent smile, casually holding a modified assault rifle. The image exploded across social media, and people couldn't believe someone who looked so normal could be part of a cartel. In the old days, cartel members could operate pretty much unbothered, but in the age of viral posting and smartphone cameras, La Flaca's face was suddenly everywhere. A rival faction, Los Metros, saw their chance clear as day. So they share this photo as soon as they get their hands on it, and they make sure it got to every crime-tracking website in Mexico. April 12th, 2015, Tamaulipas. La Flaca and 2 of her associates vanish without a trace, and no one hears anything for 24 hours. Some say she went to Texas, others said she went into hiding. But the truth, as it turns out, is far more gruesome than we could have imagined. The next morning, authorities find 3 beer coolers in the back of this abandoned pickup truck, and the brutality of what was inside was crazy. La Flaca's body had been dismembered, and right next to the coolers, a message for all the members of Los Ciclones, specifically calling them out for letting a woman rise to power within their ranks. But here's the thing about cartel rivalries. They're never simple. Rumors spread around that La Flaca wasn't killed by Los Metros at all, but by this other female assassin known as La Gladys from the Zetas cartel. Some think it was personal, others argue that, at the end of the day, it's just business. But the truth died with La Flaca in those coolers. Today, the Gulf Cartel still recruits teenagers, offering the same false promise of power and respect that initially lured La Flaca into their web. They target these kids knowing that the younger they are, the easier they are to control, and more willing to take risks. In the end, La Flaca's viral photo, the one that showed her proudly holding her weapon, became her final legacy. Her innocent smile told one story, but those beer coolers told another. And somewhere in there lies a truth about a teenage girl who thought she could beat the cartels at their own game, right up until the game caught up with her. La Flaca chose the cartel life and paid with her life. But this next beauty queen married into it, and now she might have wished she had it. February 22nd, 2021, Dulles International Airport, Virginia. A very fashionable woman walks confidently through the terminal. But in a few minutes, feds are going to put her in handcuffs, and the woman known as the Kardashian of Sinaloa will trade her Prada bags for prison uniforms. Now here's the thing about catching cartel royalty. It takes years of watching, waiting, and collecting every little mistake they make. And Emma Coronel had been making quite a few. 2007, Canales, Mexico. A teenage girl steps onto the stage at the Coffee and Guava Festival beauty pageant. But this isn't just any contest, and Emma Coronel isn't just any contestant. Because when your uncle is one of Mexico's most feared sicarios, and your father's running drugs for the Sinaloa cartel, even a small-town beauty pageant becomes something else entirely. That night, 6 planes landed in Canales, and 200 armed men on motorcycles escorted none other than Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the most powerful drug lord in the world. He was 50 and Emma was 17. And much like any other loving wife, she seems to think fondly of that time now. In this interview, she said,
He was dancing with another girl. I was dancing with my boyfriend. At the time, I had a boyfriend. And we crossed paths right at the center of the dance floor. He flirtatiously smiled at me. After a while, a person told me, the man asks if I want to dance with him. I said okay.
The second she hit 18, she married El Chapo in a ceremony that looked more like a military operation than a wedding. Their guest list included dozens of high-ranking Mexican officials, politicians, and enough armed sicarios to start a small war. Now, while most cartel wives try to keep a low profile, Emma had far bigger plans. By 2019, she had transformed herself into a full-fledged social media star, flaunting her wealth to her close 800,000 Instagram followers. But she wasn't doing it for the sake of showmanship. Emma was also building her own fashion empire, using her husband's name as the brand. That's because no matter what horrible crimes people accused El Chapo of, she never saw him as the monster prosecutors described. Even as witness after witness took the stand to detail the brutal acts of violence, Emma kept defending him.
Pero pues obviamente hay que recordar que esas son personas que les dieron vida, ¿no? Entonces pues ellos van a decir cualquier cosa o para tener algún beneficio, entonces pues no me clavo mucho en.
That's Emma in 2019 dismissing testimony about how her husband tortured and buried people alive. See, during El Chapo's trial, she sat in that courtroom every day in solidarity of a man prosecutors had proven was one of Mexico's most brutal kingpins. And when witnesses described him leaving dismembered bodies as warnings, Emma couldn't care less. October 2019, Brooklyn Federal Court. Text messages between Emma and El Chapo are read aloud. They're casually discussing drug shipments and murders. In one message, Chapo even jokes about arming their 7-year-old.
Our Kiki is fearless. I'm going to give her an AK-47 so she can hang with me.
But being a supportive wife to her husband wasn't the only thing Emma had to offer. July 11th, 2015, Altiplano Prison, Alamaloya de Juarez, Mexico. El Chapo makes an infamous prison escape through an elaborate tunnel underneath his jail cell.
This is the moment Joaquin El Chapo Guzman makes the Mexican government look ridiculous. At one point, he appears to bend forward, focusing on something in the floor of the shower. Then, he sits down, appearing to remove his sandals. And then, he vanishes.
It was the escape that shocked the entire world, and Emma was there every step of the way. Turns out the tunnel led straight to a construction site where Emma had just happened to buy some property. And that wasn't even her only attempt to help him escape. The DEA later discovered that Emma had paid a $2 million bribe to a prison official trying to get El Chapo transferred back to Altiplano, the same prison he'd already broken out before. But unfortunately for her, El Chapo got shipped straight to America before the plan could work. And while all this was happening, the authorities were just watching Emma's every move. They tracked her everywhere between California and Mexico, following the money as it moved through shell companies. February 22, 2021, Dulles Airport, Virginia. The feds finally move in on Emma. They had everything they needed: text messages, planning prison breaks, that $2 million bribe to the prison guard, and money trails leading straight back to the Sinaloa cartel. And Emma Coronel, the woman who claims to know nothing about her husband's business, was about to face the consequences of playing cartel queen. November 2021, Emma stood before a judge, unable to deny the accusations. She pled guilty to moving massive amounts of drugs, helping launder drug money, and breaking special laws by dealing with her husband's property after the government had labeled him a major drug trafficker. She was given 3 years in prison, and her story is far from over. September 2023, Long Beach, California. Emma walks free from a halfway house, trading her prison uniform for designer clothing once again, and she still maintains that she did nothing wrong.
If I had known something, I wouldn't have been able to sleep or eat from desperation. I had no idea.
But 3 years in prison might be the least of Emma's worries, because choosing the cartel life doesn't end when the prison sentence does. And while Chapo's chilling at ADX Supermax, Emma's going to spend the rest of her days looking over her shoulder, knowing that her past choices have put not just her but also their twin daughters in a world they can never truly shape. El Chapo's wife continues to play innocent to this day, but our next story made sure everyone knew exactly what she was capable of. September 20th, 2015, Cabo San Lucas International Airport. On Instagram, she looked like just any other woman, posting tons of selfies along with pictures of her family. But scroll a little further, and you'll find posts showing off her favorite high-powered weapons. This was Melissa La China Calderon's feed. And in a few minutes, feds are going to ensure she'd never post another photo again. 2005, Mexico. La China was just a 20-year-old girl joining the Damaso cartel, one of many branches within the Sinaloa organization, and she intended to climb that ladder all the way to the top. And soon enough, she figured out something crucial. In this world, if men won't give you respect, you can always make them fear you instead. By age 24, La China was commanding all the cartel's gunmen in Baja California. But she wasn't interested in just being a leader. She wanted to terrify. Her signature would have been dismembering bodies and placing them in front of their families' homes at night so that by sunrise, entire neighborhoods would wake up to those warnings. But even that wouldn't be enough for La China. She would reward her soldiers with drugs for every kill, turning murder into a competition. The more brutal the killing, the bigger the reward. And needless to say, even rival cartels thought twice before stepping into her territory in no time. Then in 2014, her boss El Grande decided La China was getting too powerful. And so he had her boyfriend killed, thinking that it would scare her into submission. Instead of backing down though, La China amped up her violence even further. She gathered 300 men and started her own cartel called Las Fuerzas with her new boyfriend, El Chino. Her soldiers, riding the red motorcycles, became a symbol of death in Baja California. And in the span of just a few months, she racked up 178 confirmed kills. But La China wasn't just brutal to her enemies. When one of her most trusted soldiers criticized her for killing 2 innocent car salesmen, she made an example out of him. With El Chino watching on in horror, she cut off the soldier's arms while he was still alive and then put a bullet in his head. That's when El Chino realized something was off. If she could do this to her most loyal man, ain't nobody safe, not even him. September 2015, El Chino slips under the cracks and goes straight to the feds. That was his only protection from what La China would do if she caught him. So he told him everything, including the fact that she was planning on fleeing the country. At that point, authorities knew they had to act fast. September 20th, 2015, Cabo San Lucas International Airport. La China's walking through security, like any other wealthy tourist. Between her Instagram posting and designer outfits, she'd probably thought she'd blend right in. But federal agents were waiting. They let her get all the way to the security checkpoint before closing in on her. But even in handcuffs, she kept that ice-cold composure, like getting arrested would be just a minor inconvenience for the day. Well, today La China's sitting in prison facing life behind bars plus extradition to the US. Her Instagram is still up, a strange mix of family photos and weapons, telling 2 different stories about a woman who terrorized Baja California. Yet in the end, the cartel commander who ruled through fear was brought down by something she never expected. Her boyfriend feared her more than the cartels.